Grab your beverages and turn up your interweb. Solving the world's problems 12 ounces at a time. It's Dudes and Beer. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to episode 302 of the Dudes and Beer podcast. Chris Jordan, your host here, coming at you live from Austin, Texas tonight. Please do not forget, our podcast is now officially brought to you by podcastcadet.com. If you're a fan of podcasting like I am, do not hesitate to stop on by podcastcadet.com today. They're what you're looking for, everything from beginners to those who are already in the podcasting realm. They provide one-on-one personalized consultation for your needs, whether you're a beginner not knowing how to go through and hook up your stuff, whether you're somebody who has had a show for years and just trying to get over a hump, reach a new audience, maybe rebrand your show and want an audit done. That is specifically what they do. Stop on by podcastcadet.com today. Full disclosure, I am the owner. But we are there to help you. Podcastcadet.com is the website. Dudes20 is the code that you want to use to save 20% off of your entire cart while you were there. While you're also there, make sure to stop on by the Dudes and Beer store and check out the books On the Trail of the Nephilim, the trilogy by our great guest tonight, L.A. Marzulli. I am so happy to have him on. Speaking of guests and books, we have a whole crop of guest books. I mean, of course, I've read through Incident at Devil's Den a couple times and just got Devil's Den: The Reckoning. Like I typically do whenever I get books, I sit down and read the introduction, then I set them aside until it comes time to really dig deep into that when I have time to dig and eat. And actively got a phone call today from Terry Lovelace, the author. So I was like, I guess I really need to dig into the meat of Devil's Den: The Reckoning as soon as possible. Terry Lovelace has some fantastic first degree accounts, personal accounts of alien contact, things like that. So go by, check those out. Also, big shout out to Ryan Sprague from Somewhere in the Skies. If you have not checked out his show, it is absolutely fantastic. I got my autographed copy sent to me just before Christmas. It arrived here, I want to say Christmas Eve. Ryan, thank you so much. Stop on by and check out his show, folks. He's good friends with our friend and guest, Mike DeMonte, and I've followed his show as well as Shannon LeGros for the last little bit. And man, talk about some fantastic guests, some fantastic content. Stop on by and check those guys out. Our guest this evening, author of On the Trail of the Nephilim, L.A. Marzulli. How are you doing today, sir?
Happy New Year, Merry Christmas to you. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on. I have been excited about this since I spoke with your publicist over at LITM. It's been so fantastic to get to really dig into some of your work, especially the Watcher series. I have crammed about 6 hours of that down my throat in the last 2 days in preparation for this interview, and it has been fantastic to sit there and just ingest knowledge en masse. It is one of my favorite things to do, to just sit back with my tablet in hand, a couple of materials that I know are going to be reference materials. In this case, the Book of Enoch and the Bible were my two reference materials, as I not only read along with you but watched along during the Watchers series. So for those who may not be familiar in our audience, let's give them a quick primer real quick of who you are, what you do, and how you came to be involved, nay, mission critical on the Nephilim.
Well, it all started basically 40 years ago when I came across a line. I was heavily involved in the New Age. I had a guru. My third eye was opened. I believed in our space brothers. I did Carlos Castaneda Vision Quests. I mean,
Oh, wow.
I was completely immersed. I was 3 years in the ashram.
Mm.
So, I mean, I spent a lot of time on the other side of the aisle and found it incredibly vacant. And basically, I had done all this work, tried this technique, tried that technique, meditation, joining the ashram, trying to Carlos Castaneda Vision Quest, and things happened, but it never changed who I was inwardly. And I became a born again, spirit filled Christian 40 years ago, which changed everything. And we're not talking religion, we're talking about relationship. We're talking about an experience
Sure.
that is ongoing, mind blowing, with the real God of the universe, and it's not this pie in the sky deal. Basically, anyone who really is serious about it will spend time on the anvil in the forge of a living God, where you're heated up and then pounded into oblivion. What I mean by that, he basically comes in and rewires us and fashions us and gets us ready to work in his kingdom if we choose to do so. Again, it's all free will. So many people come across the line. Not a whole lot of people are called to a full-time ministry, if I can use that word. That's all we do. I was a worship leader for 25 years. And, the Lord changed, Father God changed my deal about 15, 20 years ago when our first book was published, Nephilim, by Zondervan Publishing, followed by 2 other books. And the first book, Nephilim, was made the bestseller book, CBA list, as well as the second book. And so I started realizing I had all this information. And my mentor for all this, by the way, was Dr. I.D.E. Thomas. He's the one that wrote this book called The Omega Conspiracy. And that book changed my life.
Oh, wow. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, 1988, 1990. That was the book that changed my life. And I was living in Los Angeles and we were until the fire in 2018. I've been there since 1974, so do the math. A lot of years there. And Dr. Thomas was only about 40 minutes away, so we used to meet for lunch. And I got to pick his brain. And I received my honorary doctorate from Dr. Thomas. And since then, all told, we've written 13 books. The newest book, which will come out about the second week in January, third week in January, it's called The Countermove, How the Nephilim Returned After the Flood. I probably get a couple of emails a week from people asking me about this. And in some ways, that served as a nexus for writing the book. And this book was very difficult to write. Not that the subject matter was difficult. There was just a lot of spiritual warfare in and around it. It took over 2 years, and it really should have taken 6 months. So it gives you an idea that the enemy doesn't want this out, but it'll come out. It's at the printers, and barring a catastrophe, we should have it in a couple of weeks. And I also was involved with my good friend who passed away coming on 2 years this August, Richard Shaw, the director and the co-producer of the Watcher series. And Rick and I did 10 films in that series. Rick taught me everything I know about filmmaking. And we parted company amicably in 2015. And I started my own series called On the Trail of a Nephilim. There are now 6 episodes in that. We're working on number 7 and 8 simultaneously.
Oh, wow.
And that explores that there's a hidden history that's been deliberately obfuscated from the peoples of the world. And that's what we go to these ancient sites and uncover artifacts, talk to people. We have archaeologists on our team. I mean, there's a lot of material.
Yeah, what's interesting, LA, is that there is a lot of material out there, and a lot of course, the history of the Nephilim has been obfuscated. Most of that was actually due, oddly enough, not even to the Catholic Church. It was due to the second century AD in Jerusalem, whenever they decided on the actual books of biblical law and what their canon was supposed to be for religious Judaism. And then, of course, that is what the Catholic Church based the Old Testament off of. So it's interesting to see how even one of the cultures that followed this teaching started sweeping it aside and started moving it aside. And even as a former Catholic seminarian myself, my journey is very much similar to yours, apparently, where I spent years in youth ministry myself and turning on those not necessarily religious lights, but spiritual lights for people, and helping them understand how to carry a message into the rest of their life on a daily basis, not just within four walls and a roof on a Sunday with people of like mind.
Uh-huh.
So, and when you're doing that, topics like this come up, things like this come up, and you have to be willing to explore them. And it's not often that we get, quote, religious on this show, but we definitely get spiritual on this show, and we definitely get deep when it comes to topics like this. And like I said, I was armed with my texts as I was reading and watching along. And of course, I want to bring up the first appearance of the Nephilim in the Bible as we know it, where most people may have possibly seen it. Genesis 6:4, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. That is the first reference, is when we hear them being called the sons of God. Well, not necessarily the sons of God, but also at a time when the sons of God came onto the earth and made children with men. So that obviously leads down a few rabbit holes in modern lore and modern disclosure thinking when you're talking about hybrids, things like that. So let's kind of start cracking the nut a little bit about the Nephilim, who they are, what the history is of them, and what they're really all about.
Well, in order to really delve into that, we need to jump back a few chapters to Genesis 3:15. And we know, and this is all written in the new book, by the way. So Adam and Eve are in this place, paradise, and they're told, for whatever reason, not to eat of this one fruit. They can do whatever else they want to do. They're in total fellowship with God, the real God of the universe. But there's something else that's going on here that a lot of people often overlook. This character, the serpent, the dragon, comes into the garden and converses with Eve. So we need to stop right there. First of all, talking snakes don't exist. So what are we looking at? What is going on? And the other fact is Eve is not startled. At least we don't hear it. Eve converses with this entity like it's, it's an everyday occurrence. So that leads us down many different rabbit holes. A lot of it is conjecture. We don't know how long this relationship with the serpent went on. Was it a day, a week, a month, 10 years? We don't know.
Yeah.
We have no idea.
It just said that she kept company with it and talked with it.
Right.
Yeah.
We only know that at some point it persuaded her to do it. And of course, the serpent lies and said, well, God didn't really say that, did he? Because the day you eat of the fruit, your eyes will be open. You'll know good from evil.
Yeah.
So they give up their authority. They give up their authority to the dragon. And at that point, they take on the dragon's DNA, enters into them. Disobedience enters into them, and they know it. And they completely freak out. That's why they hide themselves from the Lord. They cover themselves with fig leaves. Yeah. So that in itself was a 3-hour conversation. The bottom line is, when the Lord does appear, and I believe it's a theophany, incarnate Christ himself, who comes in, basically sets a mandate. And he states that the seed of the dragon, the serpent, will be at enmity, at war with the seed of the woman. He will crush the serpent's head. The serpent will bruise the rest of the biblical narrative.
Yeah.
For the most part, it's never taught in churches. And the word offspring, seed, is used.
Yes.
The seed, the offspring of the serpent. Well, skip over 3. This is the purpose of this new book, which we could spend the rest of the night on. But the bottom line is, we know that the sons of God, the B'nai Ha-Elohim, always, 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 always refers. We know this because the Bible tells us this in other passages where that exact verbiage is used, B'nai Ha-Elohim. And we've got people weighing in on this in the new book, Randall Gonzalez, Hebrew scholar, Doug Hamp, Hebrew scholar, and others.
Which, I mean,
so I have to rely on people who are.
Yeah, and the loose translation, I know we lost you there a little bit, but the loose translation of B'nai Nephilim is basically sons of the fallen. Correct? Something along those lines?
That's a great way to put it. They are the sons of the fallen angels. And the reason is this going on. 15. The dragon knows that someone is coming who will take his kingdom from him, who will crush his head. Because at this point, basically has usurped the title deed from Adam and Eve, taken what was theirs, and now he owns it. So he's king of he's the prince of the king, the prince of this world. That's who he is. Okay, and so he hears this decree. Years later, the fallen angels descend on Mount Hermon, and they take an oath, and that oath on Mount Hermon thousands of years ago is really the nexus of the whole book. That's what is said, found in the book of Enoch, makes us understand exactly what's going on. Here are some of the parameters of this heavenly war. This is what's going on. The bottom line is the fallen ones know someone is going to come and take the kingdom from the dragon and his cohorts. They don't want that. So what do they try to do? They try to destroy the seed of the woman, and they almost succeed. Get on board that ark. Only 8 people, and I believe that they were protected supernaturally from not being contaminated. And I do not believe that one Nephilim gene on the ark, and that's part of what the book also addresses. That not for a minute do I think Ham's wife bore the Nephilim gene, and that's how they came back after the flood. Not for a minute do I believe that, and that's what the book is essentially about. And I know I'm going to get a lot of flack because there's a whole segment out there, that Ham's wife was a Nephilim, but that's not what the text says, because the Lord himself basically gives them a vetting. Noah, you, your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives. Now, why would he say that? Why would he go out of his way to specify Noah, you, your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives? So, I mean, do you think that the Lord's going to, well, I guess I'll just let one of them on? What the heck? It's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. It impugns the character of a holy God, an all-knowing God. It almost makes him a trickster. That's not what happened. Well, there was a second incursion.
Now, what's interesting, though, you bring up this concept of trickster, and something that I have always found interesting, especially whenever you start talking angelic presence, is the angelic relationship between God and man in the Bible, as well as other texts where they are mentioned in Hebrew tradition, Arabic tradition, things like that. And a lot of that is, of course, entangled in death. A lot of that is, of course, entangled in being the messenger of things that are quite often the portents of something not so great. And specifically when you're talking about Lucifer, who, of course, we know was an angel, bearer of light, is the name in Latin. Fallen angel becomes Satan, leader of the horde and all that business. And, of course, the serpent of which you're speaking in the Garden of Eden. But what's curious is that, yes, God, the God in the Garden of Eden says, for generations, for all generations, your children will be at war with each other. But that's the only real admonishment that he gets. Aside from that, it's like, what are you doing, dude? And then you can even go into Job, where quite literally God is sitting there with his angels going like, look at Job, man. Like, he's not even one of my people. Look at him. Look at how much he loves me and adores me. And up pops Satan in the heavenly court. Like, hey, oh yeah, you think he loves you, huh? And it's so interesting to go through and read these. Even the test of Christ in the desert is so polite. You know,
well,
almost a handshake and a tilt of the hat, and just going, "Yep, just making sure, buddy." So it's interesting to me the way that this cast down demon is almost, like you said, deified on this planet, but at the same time, completely mixed up in all of it.
What most people don't understand, because they're blinded to it, the entire planet is seething because we are moving into the time of Jacob's trouble, prophesied in the biblical narrative. 7 years of tribulation that deals with the nation of Israel, not the church. We're out of here. That's my personal belief. If the church leaves, and that ushers in what's known as we can see that things are being set up for it even now. The vaccine, the mark of the beast. No, it's not the mark of the beast, but it's certainly a precursor to it. It gets people, for me to get on this bus, plane, or lorry, I've got to get 19 vaccination.
Sure. It's a.
I don't have the vaccination.
And you know, definitely a quote normalization to the narrative. You still? Sorry about that. I think we were losing you.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So we find ourselves in a very unprecedented, tumultuous period, like any other time in all of history. Never before in the history of the world have on for 40 days like we did in March with the CDC and the WHO and Dr. Fiasco and everything else. And now, you know, Fiasco, Dr. Fauci, keeps moving the goalposts, and people have had it up to their eyeballs. And what's real, this is off topic, but I talk about this stuff on my show, Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural. It's our YouTube show under L.A. Marzulli, but it's Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural. If you're interested, you can get the free app by going to my website, lamarzulli.net. Download the app, never miss a show. We do a daily show. But what the whole thing is designed for, the back of the middle class, into a two-class socialism type system. And that's why we see it already happening in democratic states. And it's draconian. I mean, this woman, a hairdresser, I forget which state, I think it was Oregon. Oregon. And the governor came after full weight of the law and basically had children's services to see if this is the type of stuff that the Third Reich was famous for, all because she defied the governor and wants to keep her salon open. And I've been in the get-go. How is it that Home Depot and Lowe's and Costco and all these big box realtors and supermarkets can stay open that have thousands and thousands of people on a daily basis, but the hairdresser can't, which may have 30 or 40 or maybe 50 clients during a day, or a restaurant, which may have 500 or 600 people? Maybe that's a big. I mean, what are we looking at here? This is by design. And what's alarming to me is that that Trump is not doing anything about it, essentially. And so it's, we are well on that, which if this election holds, and I don't want to wear off topic, but I talk about this stuff on PP&S Report, Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural. If the election results hold, and I believe there was massive fraud, and certainly in the 5 swing states and elsewhere. And, statisticians have come on the record saying this is a statistical impossibility to see that Biden all of a sudden spikes at 3 o'clock in the morning and overtakes Trump, and then the algorithm is set so it's Biden always gets 5%, Trump gets 2.5%. So no matter what happens, the algorithm will change the votes. Now I realize that sounds like a conspiracy theory. Watch the next 2 We'll see. The fate of the republic is at stake because if the Democrats get in, and by the way, Biden will last maybe a month or two, and they'll evoke the 25th Amendment, and now we've got Kamala Harris as president, or someone else that comes up. Anything's possible. Anything's possible at this moment in time. So I'm praying to God that that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And of course, if the Democrats take the Senate, then Republic as we know it goodbye. And that's not conspiracy theory. You wait. I hope I'm wrong. I pray to God that the Democrats don't take the Senate and that the election is overturned. But if for some reason that happens, come back in a year and let me know how your life's working out for you. Just let me know. How's everything working out for you?
Yeah. And we've had guests on this show, of course, just to wrap this topic in a nutshell real quick. We've had guests come on and talk about the virus, things like that. My audience knows I am a man of common sense. I am all for a vaccine. I think 5 months is a little too short of a window to properly test a vaccine. I don't think that there's any kind of actual, quote, science there as far as sample size being used. I think it's really odd that the rate of the actual rate of side effect is the same chance of getting COVID. So
exactly.
your chances of having a fatal side effect from this vaccine are the exact same almost as catching the virus. But it's just strange to see all these things line up. It was strange to see, like we've said with Dr. John Hall, not necessarily that China weaponized a virus or put a virus out to people, but whenever it saw that an outbreak was occurring, it sure as heck didn't do anything to halt it or stop it.
No. Yeah, it didn't do squat.
The WHO didn't do a whole lot to go and investigate why they didn't stop it. And even whenever you look at like 2 episodes ago in episode 300, we had Mitchell Gerber on, who is a investigative reporter, UN whistleblower, with 2 UN doctors that were sent to China to report on the quote-unquote state-sanctioned organ harvesting of Uyghurs and those practicing Falun Gong. And this was just a nasty rumor. And they went and investigated and then came back to the UN and said, this is no nasty rumor. So you really have to wonder, after the UN says, hey, doctors, go investigate. Is this true? And they come back and say, yes, it's true. How does China sit on their UN civil rights panel?
Bingo.
And
you're right. How does that work?
How does that work? That they get to sit on the human rights panel, human and civil rights panel. It's like, wow. Seems like that's a pretty big and blatant violation of human and civil rights. But once again, it's a situation of follow the money. And oddly enough, as is the situation with the Nephilim giants, the mound builders, things like that here in America, whenever you start going through archives and history, you find all kinds of articles about giant species being found, bones of giants being found, people 11, 10, 12 feet tall. And this is across the globe, even as close to home as Arizona. And it's wild to know that some of these finds were actively verified by the Smithsonian at one point, and now you can't even find reference to them at the Smithsonian. You can find the articles written by the Smithsonian about them, but you aren't going to find the bones at the Smithsonian, folks. They are
well, no, everything.
Yeah, they're crated up, being guarded by, quote, top men. As Indiana Jones was told, very much the same situation, and it's really, really strange. Let's start getting into that just a little bit. Some of the like you were saying, straight obfuscation of the existence of giants on this earth and what would be known in the time of biblical times as the Nephilim.
Well, let me give you one cogent example of finding an artifact and then watching the powers that be cover it up. So I got wind from another researcher who wrote a book, Mysterious Catalina. And I had lunch with Jim, or dinner with Jim, and we looked at some of the things that he was talking about in his book. But the reason why I wanted to talk to him was in one of the chapters he talks about this archaeologist in 1919 and 1921 who was out in the Channel Islands. The Channel Islands go from Santa Barbara down to San Diego, right off Los Angeles. Catalina is about 26 miles away. And so he's out there on Catalina Island and he's discovering 9-footers. And he's got photographs of these things. Well, all that vanishes for decades. No one knows where the records are, the photos are. And we get this front page newspaper that this cache of records was found in the Wrigley Theater on the island of Catalina. Immediately went out and the owner, or I should say not only the curator, but the guy who ran the museum, and I was flatly told, no, you can't come out and look at what's there. This went on for about 6 months. I got wind that they were going to build a new museum and they're looking for donations. So I offered something that wouldn't be insulting. I offered $1,000. And that turned out to be, in some ways, some of the best $1,000 I've ever invested. So I flew out to the island. A friend of mine is an airplane pilot instructor. So I got my first lesson how to fly. And he took off and landed. I flew. And then on the way back from Cal, which was really amazing, and went around the island and all the way back, and then he landed again. So it was like, part of me going, this is, you start looking at what that costs, and it's way out of my pay grade. So make a story even longer. We landed on the island. I met my friend Jim, and we went to the museum right around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, closing time. And we walked in, and they had 2 tables set up in the back room where the vault was. And the vault is where they have all the artifacts. And these were covered with white paper. And I set my camera up, and they asked me, what do you want to see? I said, let me see the photos. And I spend time in the archives. It depends on where I am. I haven't been in any archives recently, but I've been in them before. And you can spend, 3, 4, 5 days there and never find diddly squat. Absolutely nothing. Well, in the first half an hour, I'm just like going, oh my gosh, look at this. So I found this one picture of Ralph Glidden standing in a recently excavated grave. In front of him, in situ, is a large, very large skeleton. I photographed that. I'm the guy that found it. Other people have taken it and used it. You can't copyright a photograph, but it's my discovery. And a lot of these guys never give credit where credit is due, especially on YouTube. But I'm the guy that found it. And I'm also the guy that analyzed it. Now, they can't take that because that's my intellectual property and all those drawings that we did for the analysis of the skeleton. I had 3 different people analyze the skeleton, and based on Ralph Glidden's height of 5'8", all 3 technicians, who there was no collusion between any of them until after their results came in and after they wrote me their final results on paper and emailed them to me. Then I introduced them all at the same time and let them go at it. All 3 put the skeleton at just around 9 feet. Now that's a giant. That's a giant. And so what the Catalina Island Museum did when I published the book, my friend and I, Richard Shaw, who I mentioned earlier, Watchers series, I think this is in Watchers 8, I think. We went back, or maybe 9 or 10, I don't know. We went back to the museum, and there's the picture of Ralph Glidden in the grave, but there's no giant. They cropped the giant out of the picture. So we photographed that, and that went viral. And we talked about it. And in fact, actually working on another film called Out of Place Artifacts, and I'll be using some of that footage which we didn't show in the film in this new film I'm working on. That is proof that there's a 9-footer on Catalina, and that's just one. And it's not only on Catalina Island, and it's not a fluke. It's everywhere in the Americas. We hear this over and over and over again. There was a lost race of giants. They were cannibalistic. They had 6 fingers, double rows of teeth, red hair. They would raid the Native American villages. They would pull the heads off of braves like a Coke bottle, tilt their heads back, drink the blood, and throw the lifeless body to the ground. How do I know that? Chief Joseph Riverwind came on the record and told me that. And in our film,
wow,
he tells the audience that also.
And the films are absolutely fantastic. Like I said, I have been engrossing myself in them over the last few days with Amazon gift cards. And if you want to check it out, folks, there is some fantastic stuff in there. I know I have made it through to number 6 out of 10, correct? And I've yet to hit the new material that you're talking about. But I did happen to pull up, just to bridge the gap here, since you're talking about ancient giant races in America, which was, of course, springboarded off of me talking about the finds in Arizona, things like that. But right here I have it up on screen from Gaia. Giant human skeletons found buried in mounds across North America. This came out all of a few days ago. This was December 7th. I do not know how this slipped my radar, but this was the second part of our conversation this evening, was the mound builders of North America and some of the mysteries behind that, because that is something that, once again, is across America, and like this article is saying, obvious strange things there surrounding that. So let's get into that in this last part of the episode here.
Great. Yeah, I've been to many mounds, and I have to thank my good colleague Fritz Zimmerman, who wrote a book called Nephilim, Fallen Angel in the Ohio Valley, the Nephilim Chronicles. Fallen Angels in the Ohio Valley, the Nephilim Chronicles, to open my eyes to the mound builders. And also thanks to my colleague Russ Disdar, who pointed me to my first. I was in Newark, Ohio at a conference, and Russ, I've told this story so many times. So my battle buddy, Russ Disdar, calls me up on the phone. I'm in California. He goes, "Hey, lady, you know where you're going?" I go, "Yeah, Russ, I'm going to Newark, Ohio for this conference." And he starts chuckling sort of mischievously. And he goes, "No, do you know where you're going? That looks like Cahokia, by the way, but it might be Aztalan, the mound in front. It's really a fuzzy picture. It's either Cahokia or Aztalan. I'm not sure which." And anyway, so I go, "Yeah, I'm going to Ohio." And he goes, "No, do you know where you're going?" I go, "Russ, what are you talking about?" And he goes, "Well, are you by your computer?" And I say, "Yeah, I am." He goes, "Well, Google Fritz Zimmerman, Fallen Angels in the Ohio Valley, Nephilim Chronicles." So I do that, and I just sit there with my jaw on the ground while Russ is laughing to himself, chuckling. I go, "You have got to be kidding me." So I'm out in Newark now. I'm at the conference, and this is years ago, probably about 11, 12 years ago now. I try to get a hold of Fritz. I shoot him an email, no response. And so I talked to my driver, who's schlepping me from the conference back to the hotel. That's the way things are usually done. And so I go to my driver and I go, "Hey, do you know anything about the Circle Mound? We go by it every day, twice. It's on the way to the conference." I go, "What?" He goes, "Yeah."
Oh, wow.
2 minutes, we're going to pass it. So sure enough, we go by, and there's the sign, the Ohio Earthworks, a great service. And so I had him drop me off at the Great Circle Mound in Ohio, and on a Sunday. So the conference was over, stuff. Now it's Sunday afternoon, and I said, "Look, pick me up in a couple hours. let me just spend some time here. So he lets me off in the parking lot. There's no other cars there. And immediately it's this huge earthwork. I mean, the mound of earth is 20 feet in the air. And I would start walking up this asphalt path. And I noticed a little building to the right of me, which was obviously some sort of a museum, which was closed, of course. And I turned to my left, and I'm in front of the entrance to the Great Circle Mound. Now, this isn't just a small circle. This is about 1,200 feet in diameter. The thing is huge, absolutely humongous. And I sat there looking at the Great Circle Mound, and for probably 5 minutes, 10 minutes, all time was lost. I just sat there looking at this thing, afraid to move, every cell in my body tingling, shallow breathing. I was afraid to move. That's what an impact it had on me. And I realized I was looking at the rest of my life. I was realizing that this was the beginning of the last chapter of my life, that I would be following the trail of a Nephilim like this till I couldn't do it anymore. And that became the nexus for the films on the trail of a Nephilim. There's now 6. You can go to Uscreen, or it's actually streaming.lamarzulli.net, streaming.lamarzulli.net. You can watch all 6 in the Omnitrail series for under $25.
Oh, nice.
So it's a great deal. Yeah, binge watch them, folks.
Done right
and
here.
Have your mind blown.
What's it sound like I do? That's exactly what I do. My poor wife, she's the one that gets to watch it with me. She woke up earlier from a nap with the kid and was like, "Oh, what's this?" And I was like, "Oh, that's my guest." And it was actually, I sometimes like it whenever she walks in and knows that I'm not doing guest prep. And just kind of goes, "Ooh, this is interesting." So yeah, this was one of those moments, specifically when it came to the skulls in Peru, things like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely fascinating information to see that obvious genetic change with people going on right there. So,
and let me just jump in because I know our time is short.
Sure.
When you look at the Circle Mound, we hired a surveyor. Now, I'm assuming that other archaeologists have done this. I'm not an archaeologist, but I work with 2 of them. And so we hired an archaeologist, and we had him, well, how level is the moat? So the Circle Mound is 1,200 feet in diameter. And in the interior, there's a moat which goes around the entire circle, except where the entrance is. And in ancient days, it was more than likely filled somehow by Raccoon Creek, which is about a quarter of a mile away. But all that's gone now. All that plumbing, I mean, it's all gone. Now, if you started digging for it, you might find the way they did it. Anyway, so our question with the surveyor was, how level is this thing? And he surveyed it, and he basically said between 6 inches and a foot.
Wow.
And what I mean by that is 1,200 feet in diameter. So, this is a really big thing. Question instantly, how did they do that in the ancient world? They don't have backhoes. They don't have, in the Neolithic, shell hose. They've got flint hose, things like that. We're in to fill it up. I mean, and how did they know it was level? You try to go 20 feet, pour a slab of concrete for 20 feet, you can be off a quarter inch.
Oh yeah.
Real easily.
Yeah,
this
absolutely.
Is 1,200 feet in diameter. And when I say 6 inches to a foot, you gotta remember this. And we're looking at slough and runoff and who knows what else, and leaves piling in there, turning into dirt for the 6 inches to a foot. But for all practical purposes, according to a surveyor, and he says it on the film, that it's that level. Well, okay, so how did they do that? And the only way you can figure out is, well, they must have used water on some level. So you start going back and deconstructing that. We're looking at something that took a whole lot of time and effort, and that's what archaeologists do.
Yeah.
They look at these things. Oh, it took 200 years to build. Well, you don't know that. You're just guessing. You're just guessing.
Yeah.
And that's what they do. They basically read an. Look, they don't even know, and they'll be the first to admit this. They don't know what these people called themselves. They have no idea.
Yeah.
They call them the Hopewell. Hopewell was a farmer who started finding artifacts. So they named an entire culture after Hopewell. And I'll just give you one more conspiracy, then I got to go. I'm fading fast here.
No worries, my friend.
There was a guy called Cyrus Thomas. A lot of speculation in the 19th century, into the 20th century. Maybe a lost race. Who built these things? Something's going on. And it was very mysterious. And, you know, a lot of people had a lot of different theories. And there were artifacts like ancient Hebrew. Oh, that's a fake. A fake. Because I said it's a fake. Oh, okay. So this guy, Cyrus Thomas, decides that, well, this is what happened. And this is the paradigm we're going to embrace. Native Americans built all these mounds, but they just simply forgot that they had done so. And that is what's taught in archaeological schools.
Yeah.
If you're going to school for an archaeologist, that's what you regurgitate.
Yeah, these people who for tens of thousands of years have maintained an oral tradition have just forgotten about this major geologic accomplishment.
Right. Major accomplishment.
We forgot about this thing that took our people 200 years to create. Totally spaced on it. Forgot about it. Know how to make some good biltong, though.
Utter nonsense.
Like,
it's utter nonsense. In the Serpent Mound, there's signage now which says that the Shawnee built the Serpent Mound, and we show this in the film. But we have the chief of the Shawnee, Chief Wallace, the chief of the Shawnee, that comes on the record and says, we didn't build a Serpent Mound. Yeah. We didn't do it. So who do we believe? Hey, Chris, I'm feeling under the weather, but
absolutely.
Let's try to hook up a little later on in the year. We can get into this more in depth.
Most definitely. Please do hold the line while we close things out. I want to thank you so much for coming on, sharing this information. One last time, tell everybody where they can go to watch the films, get the books. I mean, of course, they can go to the Dudes and Beer website, to the store, dudesandbeer.com/store, to buy the books, all that kind of stuff. They can go there to see the videos on our video page from your YouTube. But where can they go to see everything, buy everything? One last time for shameless self-promotion.
Thank you. It's shameless self-promotion. It's lamarzulli.net. lamarzulli.net. That's the website. If you just want to binge watch and stream instant gratification, that's streaming.lamarzulli.net. streaming.lamarzulli.net. All sorts of stuff. We are on the trail of the Nephilim.
Well, please do hold the line while we close things out. Make sure to go on by that website, folks, lamarzulli.net, streaming.lamarzulli.net as well, for all the great content. I love having him on. I cannot wait to have him on again to talk about this topic more and so many other things. While you're online checking everything out, please make sure to go on by dudesandbeer.com. That's where you can find the Knowledge Vault. That's where you can find all the episodes. Great things in the Knowledge Vault. We're adding some new documents in there. Tons of declassified stuff. WikiLeaks just did a major dump if you have a whole server to put things on. Till next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and if you can't be good at it. We'll talk to you soon, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Dudes and Beer Podcast. To listen to our audio streams or chat with us live, download the official Dudes and Beer app for Android and iDevices.
Being
available
rebuilt.
on Google Play and iTunes markets. For more episodes, content, and information, visit us online at dudesandbeer.com. You can also find our episodes on Breach.tv, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast service. Dudes and Beer is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. For more about our sponsors and other podcasts on this network, visit hcuniversalnetwork.com. Thanks for listening, everybody, and until next time, drink responsibly.